audience, but all of us are sinners or potential sinners, and therefore need to be at the mercy of others and of the divine in order, I'm a secular Jew, but the divine, in order to endure life. Now, Romanticism does away with this and says to us that all of us are angelic by nature. The interesting thing is that Romanticism coincides with the decline in organized religion. So just as religion is declining, Romanticism rises and is in many ways a replacement, a secular alternative. So when we get together in love, what's fascinating is the beginning of the use of the word angel to refer not to those winged creatures up in the sky, but to refer to other human beings. And there's a marked increase of this in the age of Romanticism. And nowadays, of course, many of us will cheerfully call our partner angel. So we are all of us, in a sense, through the lens of Romanticism, good people. Our wings have been temporarily put aside, but essentially we're pretty perfect people, not particularly tainted by original sin. Now, I think this is highly troubling for relationships because it leads to that absolute problematic dynamic within any relationship, which is self-righteousness. If you think that you're quite perfect and that your partner is quite perfect too, that's trouble anyway. And if you start a relationship, you'll soon start hitting upon things which will lead you to think that actually maybe they're not that perfect. Now, what do you do with that feeling if you're operating against an ideology that says that everyone, and that your partner particularly, is by nature good? Very unhelpful backdrop in which to negotiate the troubles of relationships. It's far better, I believe, to insist that all of us are, in various ways, deeply, and I don't mean this in any way in an insult, deeply crazy. I may not know exactly how you're crazy. I can tell you later how I'm crazy. I won't. Well, I might. But basically, all of us, none of us get through the gauntlet of early childhood, adolescence, etc., with our sanity entirely intact. We are all of us warped, distorted in very distinctive ways. It may take us 50 years to work out exactly how we're distorted, but we are distorted. And this is a fundamental piece of knowledge which we should be taking with us into relationships, with a big warning sign over us. Now, why are we so unable to conceive of ourselves as damaged and crazy, and therefore so prone to self-righteousness? Well, part of the problem is that all of us have very low levels of self-knowledge. And self-knowledge is really, really hard to come by, partly because there's almost a conspiracy of silence around us. People don't quite tell us what they think of us. And therefore, we go through life where the average person who's met us for 20 minutes has a deeper insight into many of our flaws than we might achieve over a lifetime. Why don't people tell us this? Well, there's really no motive for them to tell us this at many stages. Our parents are not going to tell us certain things that they know. They can see things about us, but they're not going to tell us because they're very kind, they wish us well. It's not really their business. They're not going to go into it, and maybe they're blinded by their own affection for us. There's our friends. Well, of course, our friends are not going to tell us certain things about our characters, the ways in which we're difficult in particular, because all they really want from us is a pleasant evening out. They don't care. You really have to care about someone to be bothered to go into all that stuff about their true character. And our friends, certainly, they can't be bothered. They don't like us enough. So it leaves then that other category, our exes. Well, our exes, you could expect that they will, somewhere along the lines, have told us, but the thing, on the whole, it's not really worth their while either. And so they tend to take their leave by saying things like they need to spend more time on their own, they need to develop their character, they'd like to go traveling. Nonsense. Of course not. They see certain things about you, but again, they're not going to go through it. They can't be bothered. They just want out. Let somebody else sort that out. So the thing is that we go through life not really knowing. I mean, it's very tender and poignant how sometimes some of us feel, probably some of you in the audience feel, that broadly speaking, you're quite easy to live with. I mean, does anyone here think that they're kind of broadly speaking easy to live with, if only they met the right person? Like, there are a few people, that's a very poignant combination, whereby a very romantic combination. I spent my early 20s absolutely convinced that the only thing that was missing was really the right person. And if so long as I met the right person, then all would be well. So this notion that we might be easy to live with is deeply misleading and should be stamped out. Of course, we're not. Everybody from close up is trouble. And we need to put this in mind, bear this in mind. If I was running the world, one of the key questions that we would always ask each other on an early dinner date, without anything pejorative being meant by it, is, how are you crazy? So I'm crazy like this, how about you? And that we'd be expected to have a really thoughtful and kind of well thought through, non-defensive, non-hysterical answer to that question to be able to share with another person. Think how much time we would save. We don't need people in relationships to be perfect. We need them to have a handle on their imperfections and to be able to warn us and prepare us for the more noxious sides of their personalities outside of those critical moments when those personality distortions have deeply upset us. But it's very hard to do. And most of the time, we come upon discoveries about other people at moments when those discoveries have pained us deeply, and therefore we are not likely to be in any way sympathetic. So the calm explanation of one's insanities to another person is one of the greatest gifts. And I think one of the best wedding presents that any of us could give one another is a large book called, My Insanities, that you would give. Each person would give My Insanities to their partner, and think how much time I think we would save. The other thing that romanticism really gets wrong is this emphasis on instinct, right? So, the old marriage of reason, marriage by the family, etc. And then, the romantics tell us there's this marriage by instinct, that special feeling. Well, the thing about it is that, you don't need to accept or even know much about psychoanalysis and psychotherapy to just take on board the one key central idea of psychotherapy, which is the way that we love as adults is a reflection and deeply connected to the way that we learned about love as children. That is the foundation stone of psychotherapy. So you look at how you are in adult relationships, and there are a million connections that you can make with how we learned about love as children. Now, the problem with this is that the way that we learned about love as children is likely to have been a bit problematic. It's likely that we received affection, certainly, but that in one way or another, without necessarily meaning to, our parents did us a great disservice. In some ways, they damaged us, without necessarily meaning to. And this has very particular consequences for our capacity to find love as adults. Because often what we're trying to do in adult love is re-find a kind of love that we knew as children. But the kind of love that we knew as children was not necessarily problem-free. Indeed, it was very particularly and interestingly distorted and laden with all sorts of difficulties. And these become the new criteria which we search for in our adult partners. So when people say that in love, what they're looking for is someone to make them happy, to make them content, to bring them happiness, we can't necessarily believe them. Really, what we're searching for when we search for an adult partner is someone who feels familiar. And very often, the kind of people that we meet don't feel familiar in the level of care, generosity, and goodness that they're bringing to us. It just feels a little bit odd. We think, I don't necessarily feel at home with this kind of treatment. You know how it is when you sometimes set up a friend and on paper, two people are completely perfect, the two CVs match exactly, and you set them up, and then, you have hopeful expectations for the date, and then they come back to you, and you say, how did it go? How did the date go? And they say, I don't know, they're really nice. We've got so much in common in a way, all our interests, we do all the same sports and read the same books, etc., but I don't know, something was missing. And I don't know, it's chemistry, something. And very often the thing is that our unconscious has recognized that this so-called very nice person is perfect, except for they won't make us suffer in the way that we expect to be made to suffer in love. So they've got to be dismissed. They're just not going to make me unhappy in the way that I've learned to expect that love should make me unhappy. And, we know the situation in its most extreme forms. Somebody who can only take someone who will hit them, who will strike them. But even without the extremes of violence, there are many ways in which we are attracted to people, not so much for their positive sides, but because they feel, as I say, familiar in the degree to which they will frustrate certain of our aspirations for ourselves. There's another problem with romanticism. And that's really to do with the idea of honesty. Romanticism had an extremely high regard for the concept of honesty. And that a relationship, the whole point of a relationship is that you can be honest with another human being. Most of the time, we've got to lie. all the time about who we are, what we feel, how are you, I'm fine, and we're breaking down inside, etc. We're all in tears inside, we're broken, we've got to put up a front. That's what society demands of us. But finally, we can meet someone, and with them, the drawbridge can come down, the walls can come down, and we can be ourselves. And there are wonderful moments in the early moments of love, in the early phase of love, when we really do feel that we have found someone who can accept all of us and take on board everything that we are. We need to have no more secrets. We can be properly ourselves. And the truth is that being yourself, fully yourself, around another human being is a treat that you should probably spare anyone that you claim to love, because it's really a little problematic. Now, often it goes a bit like this. Look, let's be honest, I think no kids in the room. Often it's a little bit around sex. So in the early days of love, you've been a bit lonely in all areas, including sex, and you meet somebody and you say, do you like, that thing that you could do, like with a rope and like handcuffs? Like imagine have you ever been interested? And they go, wow, yeah, I've always wanted to try that, and but I've never dared tell anyone. And there's that wonderful sense of intimacy based on there no longer needing to be shame. We no longer need to be ashamed of ourselves. We can be ourselves in the bedroom, etc. And this is a very ecstatic discovery, and it really makes us feel so powerful in the world, because we no longer have to be a hunchback figure. We can now go out into the world and feel that some of our darkest secrets have acceptance and endorsement from another human being. This lovely phase tends to last about 3 months until normally the moment goes like this. Not the same for everybody, but a version of this tends to happen. So you've been sharing everything, you've been sharing the thing and the handcuffs, and it's all been fun. And then you're sitting in a cafe with your lover, with whom you've opened your soul, and they've opened their soul, and you spot a really quite interesting member of the waiting team, and you go, see the waiter over there? Like, wouldn't it be fun if, like, the thing with the thing that we like do? Imagine like if they got involved, we asked them to get involved, and like gave them a number, and then they could come, and then you were watching, and then you turn to your partner, and rather than being this kind of open, cheerful person, they actually look in quite a big state of distress, and they look kind of unhappy and miserable. And you go, wow, I better stop right there. And you're at a fork in the road. And one fork in the road leads to the path of honesty, and another path leads to the path of love. And you've got a choice to make. You've got a choice to make. Are you going to carry on this anecdote, this fantasy, or are you just going to shut up? And most of us are going to shut up at that point. And that's the beginning of a very fundamental moment when we realize that, of course, we cannot be entirely ourselves, not because we're trying to retain a nasty secret from our partner, but because in the name of love, we cannot be entirely ourselves. We have to accept the role of editing, because the full disclosure of who we are and what we are at every moment to another human being will probably destroy them. And therefore, we need, in the name of love, to hold back and to edit a lot. None of this romanticism prepares us for. Indeed, it makes it look like a betrayal. So it sets up it's a very, very unhelpful backdrop in which this scenario happens, because romanticism insists on authenticity. It's by being totally authentic that you are true to love. Anything else is a betrayal of love. And, well, the facts on the ground are seriously, I believe, in conflict with that romantic commandment and cause us a lot of difficulties. I'm not through with my reservations about romanticism. Another thing about romanticism that it never really talks about is romanticism never really talks about the practical side of life. In the 19th century, no romantic poet, writer, artist, etc., ever mentions laundry. There's absolutely no mention of the fact that every couple who's been together any amount of time will have to spend a lot of time doing laundry, housework, cleaning, raising children, etc. This just goes unmentioned. And this causes us real difficulties, because it sets up an expectation that, intelligent, sensitive, soulful people don't really bother about these things. And therefore, that there's no particular emphasis on making an accommodation, a preparation for some of the difficulties that might come in this area. So at some point in a relationship, a version of this happens, this kind of scenario happens. Not exactly this, but a version of this happens, which is that a couple who, are very much committed to love and, disagree with their parents and some of their more petty attitudes to things like, etc., where the salt and pepper should go, and etc., they will suddenly have an argument in the bathroom that goes a bit like this. One of the couples will say, what's that towel doing there? And the other person goes, I just had a shower. You go, yeah, but what's it doing on the floor? And you go, yeah, well, I just threw it on the floor because I got to go and meet Bill. And you go, no, I know you got to meet Bill, but what's it doing on the floor? And the other one goes, well, how do you mean what's it doing on the floor? It's just on the floor. And suddenly there's a kind of new tone of impatience, basically because both partners think that they're very, very clever and they're not petty. They're not going to sort of argue about petty things like